Hi everybody, and welcome to this video on research methods. So this is part of the science inquiry skills that you need to know for stage 1 psychology. So let's get into it. So a research method is a type of data that psychologists can collect from their experiments and investigations. So it's the method of getting the data. What tool are we using to gather data from our experiment and investigations? So basically, to put it very, very simply, it's the type of data that we collect. Now, because we're working with people and animals, we can't always rely on numbers. We need to look at different options as to how we gather data on a variety of topics. So there are 3 main types: objective quantitative, subjective quantitative, and qualitative. So let's go through these one by one and go through some examples as well. So to make it easier, let's go through what these terms actually mean. So objective, if something is objective, it means it's free from interpretation and or bias. We can't object to the results, in other words, hence the term. They are unable to be objected to. They're the results and that's it. Okay, so free from any interpretation or opinion or bias. Whereas subjective is the opposite. So this is where data can be altered by opinions and bias. They are subject to bias, hence the term. So something that is subjective to me means it's subject to my own bias, my own opinion, and my own interpretation. Objective, there's no interpretation at all. They're free from any bias whatsoever. Now, quantitative is any data using numbers. So any data that we gather that's in numbers, such as heart rates or heights or weights or rating scale responses, that's going to be obviously in number form. So that's quantitative data. Whereas qualitative data is any other data that's not numbers, basically. So any data using words, language, and pictures. Pictures can also be a form of data for us, especially with children. We might be talking about things that they're unable to understand or are too traumatic, so we will get them to draw a picture. That's still data to us. So qualitative data is any data that's not numbers. So words, language, and pictures, whereas quantitative is data using numbers. So remember the trick I told you? Quantitative data, N for numbers, qualitative data, L for language. Now we need to put these all together to talk about the different research methods that we have. So objective quantitative. So as I just said, obviously we're going to get with this with this method, I should say, we're going to get data that's in number form, so quantitative results. And they are free from any bias, so they are objective. So in other words, factual numbers that we can't argue with. So some examples of objective quantitative measures include standardized tests. So these are tests where the scores on them have the same meaning each time they're done. An example of a standardized test would be a maths test or a psychology test or a test that you have in another subject. The test is used the same way on each occasion, all right? So it's testing your knowledge and understanding and your interpretation of the content of that particular topic. And it's usually out of a numerical score. So, for example, your psychology test might be out of 60. So if someone got 50 out of 60, that's obviously data in quantitative format. And it's objective, meaning you can't object to the results. If someone got 50 out of 60, they got 50 out of 60. We can't argue with that. IQ tests are also a standardized test, and also SACE exams, all right? So any test that is used the same way on each occasion and has the same meaning and that's measured in numerical form is a standardized test. It's objective quantitative. Another really good example of objective quantitative data is any physiological measures. So heart rates, blood pressures, galvanic skin responses, etc. So if I was to take your heart rate right now, that would be objective quantitative data. I would get numerical data, so your heart rate might be 85 beats per minute, and that's objective. It's free from your own bias. You didn't give your opinion on your heart rate. That's your heart rate and that's it. We can't argue with it. So it's objective. So physiological measures and standardized tests, best examples at year 11 level of objective quantitative data. Now, subjective quantitative data is a little bit different. We're still getting data in numerical form, but it is subject to bias. The best example of subjective quantitative data at year 11 level is a rating scale. So this is where participants select their response from a fixed statement. All right, this is called a Likert scale. All right, these are frequently used. So if I gave you the statement, psychology is awesome, I then give you the following scale. You need to determine your opinion as to how much you agree or disagree with this statement by a number representation. So 1 is strongly agree, 2 is agree, 3 is neutral, 4 is disagree, 5 is strongly disagree. So if I was to give this out to you, I would hopefully get some number 1s. I would hope so. I might get some 2s, some 3s, some 4s, and 5s. I'd obviously get your opinion represented in number form. So that is a very, very easy example of subjective quantitative. So it's still in number form. I'm still getting numbers or numerical data, but it's subject to your own opinion and your own bias of your experience of psychology. So it's going to be bias, is what we're saying. I'm obviously going to say number 1 because I love psychology and I'm the teacher. Now, that's my opinion, but it's obviously influenced by my own bias. It's the same thing when we do any rating scale in psychology. So it's basically your opinion in number form. That is subjective quantitative. All right, so biased numbers, in other words. So in class, when we were doing our emotion topic currently, the intensity of emotion scales is an example of subjective quantitative data. We can definitely convert that, what we did in class, to having, low intensity emotions to high intensity emotions and represent that with numbers and so on. So subjective quantitative scales are everywhere. Now, qualitative data is, again, any data that is not numbers, all right? So often this involves open-ended and very general items. So responses in sentences and language in terms of questionnaires that we send out, survey responses in terms of, again, words and language, comment boxes, respondents for our survey questions, interview responses, and like I said before, pictures. So any data that's in word and language form and that's not numbers is seen as qualitative data. So I hope you found this video useful, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the 3 types of research method. There we go. I just thought I'd scroll back to this page here. So the 3 different ways we can gather data. It's also worth saying before I finish up that when we do an experiment or an investigation, the more data we can get, the better. So often a researcher will try, it's not always possible, but they will try to use all 3 methods if possible, because the more variety of data we can get, the more conclusions we're more likely to draw. Now, for some designs, that's not always possible or appropriate, but where possible, we'll try and get a variety of research methods. So we will try and have objective quantitative, subjective quantitative, and qualitative data in the same investigation. Okay, guys, so I hope you found that video useful. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy revising. Bye.